educators. We'll spend 2 hours together, and while we are waiting for all of you to join us, you can punch the name of your city in the chat box so we know where from you are. So just put the name of your city in the chat box. And we are also streaming live on YouTube. So we have Sujata from Noida, we have persons coming from Bangalore, Indore, Hyderabad. Great, we have someone from Turkey, from Dubai. So let's wait for a few minutes, and meanwhile the speakers are getting ready. How's the weather in Goa, Aditi? Great, lovely, raining. Raining is not lovely for us. So we'll spend 2 hours together, and I'll give a brief intro of why it's Design Open Kolkata. So my name is Alok Nandi, and we'll be co-moderating this with Hemal Kapadia. Hemal is in Kolkata, I'm in Brussels, Belgium, and we'll give you some context. And then we'll have 7 speakers sharing their points of view. And we'll make sure that out of this, there are connections emerging, and we'll open up to the audience, to the attendees. So one of the housekeeping rule is that if you have questions, do please put them in the Q&A box. If you have comments, of course, there is the chat. Do not hesitate to come with comments, questions, suggestions. In terms of questioning, we'll have 2 options. Or you tell to whom is the question for, or you say that it's for anyone. What we would request is that your questions are to the point, sharp, so that we don't lose the speakers. Imagine the speakers getting fuzzy questions. That would be quite difficult. So we count on you attendees to be kind with the speakers, and we look forward to have interesting topics. So we are 3 minutes after. We'll still wait for a minute. I see that you are coming from many places on the planet, and Turkey is very sunny today. Brussels is getting rainy. So allow me to give you some context. We are here in a session called PRE, Practitioners Meeting Researchers Meeting Educators. And it's part of a journey which began in Lyon in France in 2018. And we are super lucky to have Eya Salmi, who is the Secretary General of Cumulus Association, who will give us some perspective on that journey. The other journey is that Hemal Kapadia in Kolkata, she's the local leader of IXDA, and she's organizing IXDA meetups, and she's the one with us hosting this PRE Kolkata. Another player in this, and the one who's hosting, is Design Open. Design Open is taking place virtually with you guys in Kolkata. Design Open is a platform which was launched by Spread, and the objective is to open up conversations on design. So in terms of context, we have Design Open, which is opening up conversations on design. We have PRE, which is a spot where we are exploring questions connected to practice, to research, to education. And we decided to put this together, and we said, okay, let's make something together. Now, our initial plan was to do that in Kolkata in real life, but COVID hit. And we said, Corona or not Corona, we don't care. We want to have something happening. And so here is Design Open in Kolkata. So you know the story. Now imagine that if all of us, we were in Kolkata now, Hemal is a fantastic provider of chai and singara. For those of you who are not from India, chai, you know what it is, Indian tea. Singara is the name for samosa. And Kolkata has some fantastic spots where you can have chai and singara. So Hemal, the floor is yours. Without chai and singara, but you are hosting this with us.
Yes, I'm going to get back to you on the chai and singara soon, hopefully. But hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this wonderful session on the future of creative education. This event is hosted by IXTA and Design Open in partnership with Cumulus Association. But before we begin, I'd just like to talk a little about IXTA. IXTA, or Interaction Design Association, is a member-supported organization dedicated to the discipline of interaction design. Since its launch in 2003, IXTA has grown into a global network of more than 100,000 individuals across 200 local groups, focusing on interaction design issues. On behalf of IXTA and Design Open, I would also like to welcome today our speakers for the evening. Well, evening here in India, at least. We have Nandita Abraham, President of Pearl Academy, Rahul Bhattacharya, Associate Professor, UID, or the United World Institute of Design. We have Rajiv Ghosh, Design Leader, Microsoft, Shandar Junaid, XT Evangelist, Adobe, Sonia Manchanda, Founding Partner, Spread Design and Innovation, Meghdut Roy Chaudhary, Director, Global Operations at Techno India Group, Aya Salmi, Secretary General, Cumulus Association, and Alok Nandi, Director Partner, Spread Design Brussels, Vice President, IXTA. Alok is also kindly consented to be the moderator, and I, Hemal Kapadia, Principal, Olive Design, and Local Leader, IXTA Kolkata, will be your co-moderator for this evening. First of all, thank you, Alok, for curating this very interesting session to discuss the future of education in the creative sector. So now it's over to you, Alok.
Thanks, Hemal, and thanks for pushing IXD in Kolkata and making that community dynamic. As Hemal mentioned, we have more than 200 local groups or local chapters on the planet, and we are looking at practice and design from bottom up. We are member supported. And one of the core issues we had some years ago was when we are in the industry, we feel that people who are coming from schools are not fit for the job. And so we went into conversation with Aya Salmi, who's Secretary General, and we said we must do something together. And the first obvious thing to do is let's set up a platform where we can try to understand what is going on and what are the questions at stake. And so PRE has been taking place in Lyon first, trying to unbound these complex questions. And it has traveled in many places like Paris, Seattle, Bogota, Ahmedabad, and we'll come back on those in the course of our session. And now we are in Kolkata. By the way, yesterday afternoon, we had a PRE taking place in Cape Town, in South Africa. So what we aim here is try to have a kind of distributed series of events where we are questioning the interaction and the interrelationships between education and practice and research. And we have 7 speakers coming from education, coming from practice, or coming from both. And we have Hemal having her studio practice, who will be interrogating what is happening. Why can we make things better? How? And we took Kolkata as a kind of anchor point. As I mentioned in the beginning, Kolkata is the place where we wanted to have this session live. So some of us in this panel are Kolkata passionate, and some of us are asking, how can we have a better education scene in Kolkata. And that will be one of the topics. So imagine we'll have the tension between Kolkata as a place to anchor some of our conversations, but will be universal. You remember that novel by Rabindranath Tagore, The Home and the World, or the movie by Satyajit Ray, Ghore Bare, The Home and the World. So we'll play that Kolkata and the world, and we'll make sure that what we are talking about is useful for the world, but also useful for Kolkata and so forth. And so we have 7 speakers who are going to give their provocations, their points of view. Each of them will have roughly 3 minutes for a first roundtable, tour de table, and then we'll go into ping pong. And we'll maybe end up in places we don't know where we'll end up. But that's part of the game. We have 2 hours minus 10 minutes. So let's be ready for the ping pong. And each speaker will briefly introduce herself or himself and then jump into the topic, and we'll make sure that we move from topic to topic, we interconnect, and we try to understand what is going on this planet. So our first speaker this evening in India, or this afternoon, where if you are in Europe, is Nandita Abraham. Nandita, you are the president of Pearl Academy, and you are busy with the education scene for quite some time. So you know everything which is happening in the kitchen, in the restaurant, whatever. So Nandita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alok. And I guess now I know what ping pong has started right away. I didn't know you were going to put me on the spot. But welcome, everybody. It's really exciting to be here and to be amongst all of you, very interesting people. As Alok said, I'm president at Pearl Academy, and we are a creative education institute with campuses in Delhi, Mumbai, Jaipur, and now in Bangalore. When I thought about what is it really, and I guess we can't take the pandemic away, but more and more I have been thinking about what a huge opportunity this really is for all of design. Because look at the world around us, it is a time to refocus. And so if we can participate in that refocusing, redesigning, a focus on systems, a focus on function, technology, maybe the right kind of technology, humanness, post-humanness, and combinations of all that. And really that goes all the way into education, because design education too is at a potential resurgence where not just the design industry, not just design studios, but all industry is becoming aware of the importance of design process, design thinking as a way to solve problems, look at opportunities, etc. But if we have to make the most of this, we need to continue to stay relevant even in lockdown. We need to continue to make our education creative, innovative, and really useful for the students who are sitting at home and just looking at blank screens like we're doing now. I will talk about maybe, I don't know, Alok, whether my time is up, or can I touch on 1 or 2 of the innovative things that we've done in education?
Yeah, let's have your...
Okay, super. So I'm going to talk about about a few of the things that we've done to make our education better or more creative during the lockdown. The first thing is something that we created called a pre-semester learning experience, because young people were worried, they were scared, they were not used to being at home, not sure of what creative education would be like, etc. So for those students who had just entered the college, we created 8 weeks of I'd like to say a really memorable creative experience where through gamification, we used Instagram, we used artificial intelligence, we used AR, we used VR, and help them to get used to the idea of technology, get used to the idea of working with each other, all through a kind of a fun experience so that when the time came for the real curriculum to start, they're kind of like settled. So it was an 8-week long orientation to the world of creativity and design. Now, of course, classes have started. So I'll just touch on one more thing that we've done, because we all know how important studios, workshops, and labs are when we are on campus. And that's something that our existing students and our new students really miss. So what we have done is help them create a home studio for each student. So help them identify a small place in their house and actually send to those students who need Arduino kits. We've sent them small Arduino kits. Our fashion students who were needed to study textiles, we brought in all the different textiles, cut it into swatches and sent it. So when the faculty is teaching something, they have the same thing in their hands. Some students have got a sewing machine and a mini dress form. Some students have got Wacom tablets, drafting tables. So trying to replicate what the learning environment in college would otherwise be, and giving them not just the space, but also the equipment and tools to practice what the teacher's teaching and making it as realistic as possible. So I'll stop with that and happy to come back again later.
Great. Thanks, Nandita, because you are putting already some core topics on the table. You're bringing technology, you're bringing the relation to content, the experiential part of education. And because you already put technology, our next speaker will be Rajiv Ghosh. He's working for Microsoft. He has a strong background in design, and he's leading some of the design activities within Microsoft. So when we began this session, we said there is a gap between industry and what schools are providing to industry in terms of students' capacities and capabilities. Rajiv, what are your thoughts, reactions, and how do you see what Pearl Academy is doing so we begin to build on each speaker's input?
Yeah, so thank you, Alok. And I think just to just to echo what Nandita was saying, I'm honestly really humbled to be a part of this sort of amazing group of people who come from different backgrounds, super experienced, super talented. It's a privilege. So let me first acknowledge that, and it's awesome to be here. So now coming to the point that that you were talking about, and Nandita, you have touched upon earlier, is that, so first point I would just say that I am from Kolkata. I'm born and brought up there, but for my design education, I had to move out. That's kind of unfortunate in my mind, because if you look at culture in Kolkata, you can't find one person who does not have an amazing creative talent, right? And it's encouraged from the time you are born, and like, you know, literally, I've seen little children like literally learning to paint or dance or music and things like that. But when that comes to a stage when you need to choose a profession, we still feel like creativity, anything to do with creativity, can actually become a profession. I have faced personally that pushback from my family, and after a lot of struggle, I had to kind of go to Ahmedabad to NIT to do my design studies. And I know a lot of people, a lot of young folks who come to me with this question, is that, hey, what's the potential and the scope if I went into a creative field? There is still this sort of I won't say lack of awareness, but it's sort of gap there in terms of knowledge of the potential of a creative area in terms of profession. But in any case, I think there is big potential for that awareness to be there in Kolkata, and events like this, I hope, would take us there further. Now, coming to Microsoft and some of the things that Pearl Academy that is doing, like Nandita spoke about, is very, very relevant in my opinion. Like, I'll give you a few examples. Like, what we often find is that during interviews, etc., when we speak to students, there is a gap in terms of there are two things, two sorts of gaps that we notice. One is from theory to actually execution. There is a gap there, how to bridge that effectively. And there is also a gap of collaboration interdisciplinary, like, how do you collaborate with engineering and product management, for example. So these are the two gaps that we have seen that we sort of constantly strive to also kind of fulfill in some way. And I'm really heartened to see that, organizations like Pearl Academy is actually encouraging those kind of, bridging those kind of gaps through education itself. The thing that we do is we promote a lot of internships, etc., so that students can come in and hands-on learn. But I think there can be new interesting models where they are exposed to the industry even at a much earlier stage of education. I feel like that's one aspect. The other aspect that we are also working towards is diversity and inclusion. We are stopping to look at only elite schools, design schools, and look at a much more diverse set of schools. And to enable that in scale, it's a challenge for companies like us. So like we are experimenting with things. For instance, this year, what we did, one experiment was throw out a design competition actually across all design schools, right? And the selected students not only get a potential for a hire here, but also they get a mentorship potential, and they get like a possibility of getting mentored or apprenticeship in the organization. So we are experimenting with models like this so that our hiring becomes much more diverse, inclusive, and those things. So yeah, so though that's the kind of sort of direction that we are thinking of.
Great. Thanks for bringing that. And by the way, your nostalgia for Kolkata is shared by many of us. So let's try indeed to question how can we shape a scene which is diverse, inclusive, as well as from the education towards the professional landscapes. And we are having our next speaker who's also going to react from the professional one. It's Shandar Junaid. Shandar, you are working for Adobe. You are also originally from Kolkata, but you're now in Bangalore. And you are going also through some interesting questions vis-a-vis the education system. Tell us more.
Yes, thanks Alok for having me, and a big welcome to everyone. It's great to be among such stalwarts from the design and the education domain. So I work with Adobe as part of the strategic development team for Adobe XD, where I play the role of a design come product evangelist and enable designers with best practices around UX design and the tools involved. I've been part of the design domain for the last 20 odd years, and more recently focusing on figuring out best possible ways to enhance design and soft skills for youngsters entering this industry. So of late, Adobe is also focusing more on the design education aspect and tying up with organizations like NASSCOM, where we've developed a UX fundamentals course for their future skills program, which is aimed at students in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities across India. Right? Typically, we've noticed that students in these cities do not have access to the best possible design education or even the mindset for a design thinking curriculum that might be there in their educational streams. Today, just a few things I want to talk about, and at the same time raise a lot of eyebrows here. The first thing probably is going to tick off a lot of wrong crosses. I find nothing creative about the way education has evolved. Okay, we've just simply moved on from blackboards to digital whiteboards with some fancy animations and videos thrown in, right? So there's the environment, and then there's the content. They're totally out of sync. That's one thing which is a burning issue with a lot of these places where I see that design education is being imparted without the right practical skills or even without the right aspect of a one-on-one conversation to figure out the right way we are debating with topics like design education or design thinking, right? I feel education needs to slow down and smell the digital roses which tech has so beautifully crafted around us. Right? I'm totally for new means of teaching and content dispatch. A big fan of what tech brings in with AR and VR modes of learning. And there's something very burning that I also have to, I'll try and wrap it up. So why are we not focusing on the basics and fundamentals of a holistic preparation for students and young designers, right? So as Rajiv also mentioned, the expectation mismatch in the industry. right? There is an expectation mismatch when it comes to the roles, the expectations, the responsibilities of young designers coming in, what they're learning in the industry or in the design schools vis-a-vis what is actually practical when they're out building projects for their enterprise clients, right? So these are just a few things that I'm going to throw out there, and probably we'll have a debate and a conversation around this.
Great. Thanks, Chandar. We need 3 days now to go into all these questions. So get ready, speakers.
Sure.
Get ready, attendees, because attendees will become speaker. I see that we have attendees coming from Chile. Welcome. So imagine from Chile to Kolkata, from Kolkata to Delhi. It's going everywhere. Great to have all of you here. Questions are to be put in the Q&A box, and we have already one question coming from New York. Kalim, thanks for triggering the question. So speakers, get ready and digest the questions. So Shanda, you have put so many interesting topics which come into resonance with what Nandita and what Rajib have already put on the table. And we see that it's becoming dense. We'll go into our next phase with Meghdut. Meghdut, Rao Chaudhary, you are based in Kolkata itself. You know what is the smell of a traffic jam in Kolkata? And you'll share with us what's the status from your point of view, because you are busy running a mega group of education systems within the city and out of the city, and design is becoming a hot topic for you. So tell us more about your new love with design, and tell us more about what you see in the near future.
Thank you so much for that question, Alok. Hi, everyone. Great pleasure to be here amongst, obviously, as it has been resounded by all of the other panelists before me, amongst such stalwarts from the design profession as well as from the educational field. And it's wonderful to be on a session. This is only possible, I guess, in this COVID situation, because if we had done the Design Open in Kolkata, Alok, as we had initially planned, then we probably wouldn't have had all these people joining in from Chile and from the US or from Brazil or wherever. So that feels good. We're well surrounded, very globally surrounded. To answer your question, I think I'd first start with something with a weird experience I had yesterday. So very recently, I started a new rooftop in Calcutta, the rooftop cafe atop this school of the future that we've started in Calcutta called Offbeat CCU. And this rooftop is something that I basically designed in the last 2 weeks because I just needed a better place to host my meetings. I just thought if I'm doing it, it's such a waste of space. If I'm the only one using it, let's just open it up to the public as well. And now we have like a really nice rooftop. And thanks to my team, we were able to do this, basically overnight. In 14 days, we developed a 2,500 square foot space for peanuts. And a couple of my friends had come by, and the first thing that all of them basically said, I was asking them, oh, hey, how's it going, COVID, etc. One of the guys works at Microsoft, one of them works at ByteDance. And yeah, I know TikTok has been banned in India, but ByteDance, I guess he's working in the global teams. And all of them said the same thing. They're all from Kolkata. And the first thing they said is like, oh, we've been stuck in Kolkata for 6 months. And as an out and out Kolkata lover, and as somebody who's come back to Kolkata after spending a considerable amount of time working and studying in various parts of the world, for me, it was shattering. I hate it when people say that, that there's nothing to do in Kolkata, and there's not enough opportunities for people in Kolkata. And for that reason, I guess I've made it my life's mission to do something for this city, which makes it relatable again, I guess, for young people like young people like myself who are very talented. And as was resounded again before, that so many young people who are very talented, who have that potential to do great things, they just don't find the right kinds of outlets in the city, which is why they are bound to leave. And unless and until we're able to create an environment and an ecosystem which is conducive to promoting such positive energy and to promoting new ways of doing things, we will never recreate that city for which was known by our great grandfathers. Maybe we've sold out to a bit of mediocrity in the last few decades, and it's quite sad. And I think a lot of it is owed to the fact that we don't have modern day idols in Kolkata. It's something that really bothers me. that every time we speak about the city, we go back to that sickening nostalgia. I mean, nostalgia is great, and don't get me wrong. For all the Bengalis outside, I guess nostalgia plays a huge bit to Kolkata. But yeah, look, you were saying
we always go back to Rabindranath Tagore.
Exactly, right, and there's nothing
we need
wrong
to wake
with
up.
it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Rabindranath Tagore. I mean, we've all grown up reading his work, and we've all grown up appreciating Satyajit Ray's work. But we need modern day idols. We need to show off Kolkata and all the great things about it from the perspective of the people today, right? And not have to sink into that sense of nostalgia. So I guess that's my first exact reaction that I want to talk about, and I would love to get all of the other speakers' inputs on that as well. And the second thing that I would like to bring to the conversation, and I'm just going to let it be right now because I know time's short in this part of the conversation. But we keep calling Kolkata cultural capital, and I think there's a lot of scope for that as well. But what is with parents in Kolkata having their stacks of Gitobitan in to show off to all of their family members whenever they enter the house, right? Right when you enter the house, then you have this cabinet filled with these thick fat books with lots of prose and poetry, but God forbid your kid wants to go study creative education. That all hell breaks loose, and the next thing you know, the kids being forced to go and study engineering and law and management and all of that. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't say I run, I help with the running of a group of institutions where we have everything from engineering, management, law, nursing, architecture, but we never had that focus on doing something which means, if you're in the COVID time, you realize how important creative education, how important really creative arts themselves are, because it helps you create that outlet for all the things that are important, like dance, like music, like theater, like design. It's these things that have been keeping us alive at this time. So would love to hear more about that and what all the rest of them feel, and about how we can make Kolkata relatable again. Yay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Alok.
Thanks, Meghdut. And Meghdut, you are an education entrepreneur. And we have Sonia Manchanda, who's a design entrepreneur. And so I think it's good to have Sonia sharing her insights, because she launched some activities recently. Sonia is based in Bangalore, but she has been active in different parts of India and the world. And she's an ex-NID like Rajiv. So she knows design out and in, and she's an entrepreneur. So Sonia, tell us more about what you have been hearing so far, what you are doing, and how we can put some fire in this group of people.
Thanks, Alok. Although I'd much rather just enjoy listening to all the diverse and interesting viewpoints that are coming up here, because something is happening in this moment, and it's something right is happening, that we are having conversations like this that we didn't have before. Maybe because a crisis is a cry for creativity. In this moment, it's a bit like, and it's not just Kolkata, it's not just design, it's a crisis happening across the world. We've never had a moment like this. And in this moment, if we talk about design education, it's a bit like, creative education, you're saying, we're going to teach people how to swim in the middle of a tsunami. It's a little bit difficult, So you don't have the time to, in a linear way, say, okay, let's teach you the basics, throw you in the pool, you learn, then you go to the deep end. It's like, no, there's a tsunami and you need to swim, and you need to, design a better shore and get there. So that's what's going on. So in the middle of this, maybe our tracks have to be 3 tracks. They have to learn to feel in the moment, think in the moment, do in the moment. All of that has to happen together. And that's where we are at the moment. So what needs to be done? Maybe, listening to what Chandar was saying, and Rajiv was saying, and Nandita was saying, and everybody was saying, maybe what we need is a new approach to curriculum, new approach to programs, which are far more transdisciplinary. When new knowledge can be created at the intersection of the humanities, the arts, the sciences, and economics. So at the intersection, if we create these new programs and create these new alchemists, people who can sort of transmute materials, transmute prices into opportunity, who are working in the moment to do that. And spaces, for instance, what we have with the design barn, maybe we created it just in time. Spaces which are more like labs where you can create those seeds of possibilities. And again, intersections of industry and academia where new ideas are created. So in the context of those labs, for instance, we, over the last 120 days, we conceived a program, launched it around the idea of design, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, DICE. And there we have this concept of dares, which are challenges we've taken from industry, from the Bangalore International Airport, or from Microsoft, etc., or Amazon even. Really big challenges, systems challenges and problems that the students are actually working on. So we launched the program, we put it out completely online. It's an online studio-based program. We have experts such as yourself, Kaleem, various people who come and give the best of themselves to these students in this moment. Why? Because they're actually solving tomorrow's problems. And therefore, they're better prepared not just for industry, they're prepared for life. And so, who are we creating? Maybe what we're creating here is not just learners, but actors. They're the people who sort of are finding out what the future is like or predicting the future by creating it. So therefore, they're better prepared, because in this moment, we are finding there are students who've actually finished their education, but there aren't opportunities. So how do they learn and also learn to create their own opportunities? So these are some of the things that we are thinking about, and we feel that we need these labs, these bridge spaces. We need to bridge all of these gaps. That Rajiv spoke about gaps. There are so many gaps. Bridge those gaps, create those spaces, and that's scaffolding for creating the next level of actors who can react, therefore respond, and also learn to act and not just be like, have this deer in the headlights moment. Is really would be my thoughts on the current scenario and how we may tackle it.
Great. Thanks for bringing the tsunami metaphor, because we are in the midst of tsunami, and we need to see policymakers waking up. We need to see, when I'm listening to all of you, what I see burning is lack of infrastructure, lack of context which allows these places of transition. And when Meghdut, you are talking about the rooftop, and Sonia, you're talking about the design barn, we have to make sure that maybe policymakers, I don't know if we have policymakers in the attendees. If we were in a physical room, we would push them under the light, but maybe they are hiding behind a screen. So we should have those policymakers waking up and try to be part of the conversation, maybe to be thought about. Next Design Open with some policymakers. Nandita, can you help us bringing some policymakers from Delhi? Great. And so we need to push ourselves into creating these spaces. Now I'll give the floor to Rahul Bhattacharya. He's a professor in Ahmedabad, but he's in Kolkata. And Rahul was busy with Aya and myself in a PRE in Ahmedabad in January, just before COVID. We had a workshop where Aya from Helsinki, myself from Brussels, Rahul and all the team at UID, we had some conversations. So Rahul, you have been listening to a number of insights, and you have been through a PRE. Sonia just mentioned something important about place. What would be your input in this?
Thanks, Alok. I mean, the thread has been so nicely passed on from Nandita to Sonia, and via this very nice energy burst of points coming from everybody actually. And in a sense, we did a ping pong, Alok, but it ended up being very well curated. So I suddenly have a lot to say, and then I also have my proposition. So I'm kind of structuring it out. I'm tempted to begin with Sonia, like certain things Sonia said, triggered off certain immediate thoughts in my head. Like And it kind of links to what Sandhar was asking for. Like so when we're thinking of solutions, when thinking of any kind of solutions, so we will have, there are economic, technological, and conceptual angles to solutions, right? And in terms of creative education in India, or higher education in India as such, we've evolved economically, financially. Definitely, we've now have good infrastructures, good labs. We've evolved even in terms of technology, right? We've have facilities, or even right now, what we are going through is a technological evolution. Maybe we have not evolved conceptually enough. And as Sonia was mentioning, like we haven't really even integrated the foundations of so many things. So what could be new syllabus for design education? I think that is a burning question. Every institution by itself is going through it, because one can see that new courses are being launched. Every year, every alternate year, departments are being expanded, courses are being launched, trying to match up to what Rajiv was giving as point Z, like something called an industry expectation, you know, and linear journeys are being trying to be mapped on. It could be nice to have conversations about it. It could be nice to maybe have panels, seminars, workshops where faculty from different design institutes participate, collaborate, talk about syllabus, you know. So that is, and that's the only way to really integrate and grow. And that's, for me, that is what PRD Days is also like. Inviting Rajiv to a workshop like that, or Sandhar to a workshop like that would be fantastic, right? And to not have the, because we if you recognize that it's the same ecosystem, that we are not really working. I mean, Rajiv is very much needed in our syllabus design, and our syllabus design is definitely needed for Rajiv, right? So there's no reason to imagine them as separate entities, right, at any point. Um, and of course, Meghdut, it was that the Kolkata connection. And I was speaking to him just as we began, coming in. This is maybe the first visit to Kolkata where I have come in, locked myself up at home, not connected with the city, but connected to the world from home. Normally, when I come to Kolkata, I switch off from the world and connect to the city. But I have an observation about Kolkata, Meghdut. You might like it. For me, it's not about the past. For me, Kolkata is important because of the present. Because the moment you come to Kolkata, the cultural experience is very different. It's not your standard cultural experience. When you walk, if you go to a shop, if you try to buy something from a shop in Kolkata, if you try to buy something from a shop in other Hyderabad or Bangalore, the kind of personal relationships that develop between strangers in the city is very different. But we have not maybe been able to understand that structurally. We have not been able to talk about it, and we have not been able to find value in it. And that is maybe a push I'm interested in, and to explore that direction, and I know that we've had this conversation when we had a little prep, and and Nandita had much to say, and so this is like, so now I coming to my core point, like my proposition, like my trigger. It's not from the digitization process. I rethought about it since our prep meeting. I realized actually I've been interested in researching privatization, neoliberalization of creative education in India. Okay, that's been my ongoing research focus for a period of time now. And I realized that all good creative institutes that have come up in India post 80s, as a time when India itself begins a new relationship with the World Bank, a new relationship with the International Monetary Fund, we see the education institutes have become different. NIFT is fundamentally, if you see to a large project like NIFT Delhi coming up, after projects like NID, IIT, CEPT, and those kind of projects have been, or a Jawaharlal Nehru University have been conceived by the government, and if you see the next kind of a campus coming up, there is a marked difference. It's a more utilitarian space. It's a more, 9 to 5 space. It is a more resource come delivery space. And there is an idea of optimization of space, optimization of resource, optimization of delivery, optimum students in the classroom, that the focus, these are abstract things, but I think that it's important to consider, because I always feel that in my education, if I had only learned what I was taught in my classroom, and I think that's there to all of us here on the panel, that if I only learned what I was taught in the classroom, I would not be here today. I would be maybe just a professor in art history doing a very like doing PhDs. I don't know. I wouldn't be here today. Like first time I left my department and I went to Delhi and I got a job in Khoj. And I come from a very, very traditional art history department. My specialization is ancient Indian sculpture architecture. And I joined Khoj, and we are a part of a sound art residency, and I'm a critic in residence. I'm asked to maintain a blog on sound art. Now, who the hell taught me that? Absolutely nobody. But there was enough in my campus, there's enough in my peers, enough in my seniors, enough in my experiments happening in the hostel that equipped me subliminally to be able to approach it. And these are things that were not curated by my management. But my management gave space for the excess to happen. I'm worried that in our current campuses, are we giving space for that excess? And that becomes enhanced as we look at digitization of campuses, not only in terms of COVID, even post-COVID, say when we're having learning management systems becoming integral part of, say, design education, right? So it's a digitization of an education system, right? And how do we account for that space of an excess? From where I believe that innovation and adaptability and learning outside boxes actually happen within the space of an access. So that's proposition.
Great. So we'll ask each of the speaker to think about this notion of over-optimized system. And Rahul is provoking us on that. And Rahul, you love not only the signal, you love the noise next to the signal. That would be my metaphor. By the way, were you listening a radio? Someone in the back of you were listening a football match? Because we were... So I was fascinated by this signal-noise relationship, and I would like all of us to think and react about that. But before, we still have two speakers who we need reactions from. Eija Salmi is based in Helsinki. Eija is one of the core person of this PRE system. And Eija, you have been with Cumulus for quite some time, and you are now reaching to 1 million students on the planet with Cumulus, 1 million students. You have how many schools as members? So if Eija, you can unmute your mic and share with us some reactions of what you have heard about vis-a-vis some of our PRE, and then we can jump into Hemal, who will give her reactions to all these elements, and then we'll begin the real ping pong. Eija, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to join this journey, and learning from everybody, you and also the audience, makes me be so humble. And about my travel with Cumulus, it started already 30 years ago. I'm like a Jurassic Park T-Rex, but I think I'm biting in a very sugar kind of way. by listening to all of you and learning what Kolkata is, it's a lab of creativity. I guess it will be extremely fruitful soil as an example for the whole country, why not for the whole world, whatever development will take place. And I have to say, lockdown is not the prison, it just inspires and makes us act. Couple of words about Cumulus. Cumulus was founded 30 years ago in 1990 by us Finns, University of Art and Design Helsinki at the time, and Royal College of Art in London. And over the years, we've been joined by 340 universities in 61 countries for the moment. It's not a closed club, it's very friendly, but some way to get in is based on application. I mean, I'm happy to get on that later if somebody becomes interested. We collaborate strongly with IXDA. So thanks for building up this PRE as a platform for development and dialogue to develop education and research. I'm not happy to rehearse what the previous speakers have said, but I'm bridging outer space to domestic space. And domestic space is a definition of mine. I mean, as it's a university. And my mission also personally is to invite business, industry, NGOs, and government, I guess it was said politicians already, to discuss with professionals, designers, and educators and researchers things and enable discussion development among one or two of them also. And it was said here by somebody to match industry expectations, optimizing the environment for the talent of the next generation to enter the environment after their graduation. And my provocation is, and I guess it will last, is the talent 10.10, the beyond the classroom. And I think we educate guys not for ourselves, but for them to be able to survive on this planet and carry forward this in the space. And it was somewhere in our advertising material, together with all of you, to launch the notion of talent 10.0 rather than only talk about industry 4.0 separately. So we have to be together. My question to everybody, I might be saying thing that is known since 1,000 years. Does design education know what we are educating and how we are educating? What is the tool for development and outcome to avoid inbred way of education? Hopefully you understand my English. And we noted already it's multidisciplinarity, it's going on world around or not, diverse hiring by companies, new approach to curriculum. It's important universities to ensure that they are able to follow and implement what takes place outside the university. And the thing is contemporary need to respond to student motivation, but also somehow to respect the roots. Though again, to be informed what takes place outside, outside where, in a region, in a city, in the country, or on the whole globe. And so that you respect yourself and not be dictated only by other models. Other model, what it could be. European design education is the one, or is the one only one, or the Bauhaus model. I mean, this is in wide dialogue world around. Then I'm jumping over to the university, design universities. What are the key performance indicators, how we are measured? Are these honestly responding to student success, responding to quick development of digitalization, that all this will not be only blah, blah, but it will lead into action? Respecting learning at campus is important, not in the classroom. In the classroom teaching, it serves well many disciplines, but not necessarily our disciplines all the time. Back to key performance indicators, who decides them? Is it university and the ministry? universities, the share owners as private university or university in dialogue with stakeholders outside. Actually, I said it already. Question, governmental universities, to whom they need or we need to respond to. Is it individual? Are we responsible to the talent, graduating city, village, region, or country, to business, industry, etc.? Question, I think it was somewhere there in the question room. My question is, how does legislation rule, and does it rule in general? Private universities, is it much easier to offer what interests students? I mean, interesting for them? Are they sure? Is this good thing to study, etc.? Accreditation was mentioned. It's probably needed to be able to have a university. Research outcomes to serve the environment, the outcomes to be used in the curriculum back, so or the dissertations are the only golden medal to the individual. I would be happy to see much more usage in the industry, the research outcomes done by academia in their freedom. And again, key performance indicators on research. And back, how to facilitate higher education to be in dialogue with business, industry, NGOs, and government. Are we responsible students to get employed, or just doing it for money or for some abstract reasoning? I think we are responsible to educate, to serve the planet, and we are all in the same pot. Sorry for my floating back and forth, but I hope you will be able to sort this out.
Aya, you have put all the other speakers under shock.
Yeah.
How are we going to recover them?
No, I think these questions were already there, but I mean, just mixing back and forth. So happy to continue dialogue.
Yeah, it's great. It's great because I hope that all of you have been absorbing all this, because it has been reframed in different ways. Remember, for the attendees and for everyone, this session is recorded. And I'm sure that all of us will need to go through the recording to see all the questions that all of you speakers have put on the table. I think we need to work on that, because it's a great material. So thanks all the speakers, and thanks Aya for having set the stage. And Hemal, what would be your reactions? You are owning a studio, you have been hearing so much things in so many directions. So we'll have two things happening now. Hemal, you'll share with us some quick insights and emotional or analytical elements, and then we'll have speakers responding to some of the stuff they have been attracted to. So you raise your hand so we know that you will be the next one speaking. And meanwhile, attendees will get their questions ready. We already have a bunch of questions there, and we'll take, after your interactions, we'll take some time for trying to go through the questions of the attendees, and we'll see that time is flying. So Hemal, the floor is yours, and then we'll have some of you reacting to some of the elements which has been spoken.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alok. It's sort of bittersweet to be the last woman standing, because everyone's pretty much already said, what I wanted to talk about. But I'm going to try to talk about a bit about, my own experience and what I've gone through. Like Meghdut said, Kolkata is extremely dear to me, and I know it is dear to a lot of you as well, including Alok, of course. So while I am very emotional about Kolkata, and I love Kolkata, and I never want to leave Kolkata, but there are a lot of pressing issues. And I think more than anything else, when we talk about how do we make Calcutta a more approachable place, how do we make it a success, when we ask these sort of questions, I think that there is a great mismatch, not only in terms of the students and what they're learning in the different education institutes, but I also think that they need certain interaction with the industry itself. I don't think the industry knows the importance of designers and the difference that designers make. And so somewhere, I think I have this question, to different educational institutes as to why they can't introduce the industry in a much bigger way, so that the students are better prepared in terms of what real life scenario could look like, and also how to conduct themselves, how to present their ideas, and to speak, with a lot of clarity. So that is something that I wanted to talk about. And of course, Shandar also spoke about the soft skills and the social skills, clear communication. So these are the other things that I feel education institutes must look into. But I was one of the mentors who actually brought about the Kolkata Design Week that happened sometime in February 2019. And so this is something that Megdut could also probably pitch into later. When we did this event, we also, of course, expected the entire city, especially the design fraternity, to be very crazy about it and to pitch in and to help out and basically be proud of it happening in the city. But I saw a lot of withdrawal, a lot of rigidity, a lot of sort of temper tantrums because they weren't asked to be a speaker, they weren't asked to participate, and so on and so forth. And so I think because Calcutta is so important, and because I've always been trying to do things, even through IXDA, I got this wonderful opportunity to host interesting events, and we've had some great speakers come in. Lots to learn, but there's only a small community of people who come for it, who are enthusiastic about it. So I think that's another aspect that we need to understand when we talk about why do people not resonate with the city? Why do they not want to be here? Why do they not want to work here? Other than, of course, other things like the government, like the industry itself and the opportunities here. So these were just some of the questions that I had. And yeah, I look forward to listening to everyone get back and the ping pong ball floating about again.
Great. Thanks, Hemal. I would like to focus on a comment by Gonzalo Raineri. Gonzalo is telling to us in the chat box that it's nice to hear we are all with the same type of questions. So it's good for him to tune in and get a sense. So let's keep in mind that we are talking of Kolkata as a place, but we are connecting Kolkata to the planet, and we are going back and forth. So our thinking is pushing us to make our question more tangible. And I'm using Kolkata as a place to push the tangibility of that. So maybe Nandita, you're the first one who decided to jump in because I pushed you in the water. Now you are in the middle of tsunami and you heard so much thing. What are
You
your
want to
impressions?
push me again? Huh.
Sorry for that, but I know
No,
that you're a good swimmer.
No, not at all. Firstly, really interesting discussion. Maybe I'd like to take on two topics. I also feel very passionately about Kolkata. I was born in Asansol and my name is Nandita. So I think my parents wished that I was a Bengali. And I've spent quite a lot of time watching Kolkata and quite a lot of time in there also. And thinking about design in Kolkata. And I know, I can't remember who said we shouldn't always go back to Rabindranath Tagore, but really, it was actually Vikas Satwalekar who said to me that Kolkata has to be the base of design education, because when Bauhaus decided to go outside, when they decided to go international, their first exhibition was in Kolkata. The first time that they took paintings, etc., outside was to Kolkata in 1922. And so the seed of design in India was really design education in India came out of Kolkata. And it was that whole experience that actually brought the concept of the foundation year into what we have as design education here. Brought the concept of liberal education in terms of design with multidisciplinarity, with understanding culture. All this came out of Kolkata. But just Megdut, Hemal, loving Kolkata and wanting everybody to stay there, I think we really need to push Kolkata back and say that it's time now for the industry and designers as professionals to make Kolkata aspirational, because it's not just about keeping the students from Kolkata there. The rest of the world should want to come and study design in Kolkata. And I've met really interesting professionals, design professionals in Kolkata, very intelligent, very skilled, with a lot of depth. But it's not aspirational as a profession, and that really needs to happen if we're going to attract people from Kolkata and from outside Kolkata into that space. So I'm happy to push back with you anytime you want Meghdut, Hemal. It has to happen because I mean there's such a deep base, and like I think Alok said, that everybody has grown up with art and culture, and why not allow that to go ahead? Okay. The next strand that I wanted to actually pick up on was about education. I think it's a combination of maybe Rahul. I mean, you started it off about the spaces, creating spaces in education to learn. And yes, I think that's extremely important, and that doesn't happen necessarily in the classroom. So one has to create spaces outside the classroom, and this is the same for online education. When you're teaching digital, yes, you have an LMS, and yes, instruction and structure has to be created by that LMS. But the spaces for mentoring, the spaces for getting to really know other human beings in the environment, whether it's teacher, student, one has to, even if it's digital, you have to create those spaces, because not just the understanding of design, but even just well-being, just being acknowledged as a human being by your peers in the classroom, with your faculty members, learning from each other. These are all really critical parts of education. So when you're doing online learning, I would like to say, yes, I mean, you have your timetable, but we really make an effort to create the spaces within that where either students just break out by themselves, or break out, have office hours like everybody has, have catch-up sessions. I mean, just like it was when you were there on campus, have a cafe where students can just go to have coffee and discuss things, and maybe you can even have some discussion threads in there. There's so much that one can do. Actually, I'm not proposing that we convert to online education, but fully, but because we are where we are now, let's not forget the what is really important in education, and focus just on the instruction that there is. So I agree, that's really important.
Great. Thanks for that. And if I may coin, on one side you are talking about aspirational place, and on the other side about anecdotal place. Because if I have to play with what I heard from you and Rahul, one of the area I look into is the importance of anecdotes. And anecdotes and informal way of sharing knowledge is something which is undervalued in our systems. And you are in a way bringing that, and I love that. So let's pong to Meghdut. Meghdut, are you ready to ping or to pong? You know, in Kolkata, always. You can pong with Roshogolla.
It would be a very boring game. It just like lasts once, right? You hit it, yeah. And then it flops.
You know why you pong with Roshogolla? You just eat them like this.
Yeah, Alok is obsessed with Roshogollas. I can understand he's missing some Kesidas Roshogolla.
Yeah, so for all our international audience, Roshogolla is a sweet based out of cheese, fresh cheese in a syrup. And if you go to Kolkata and you don't have that, you have completely missed your life. So this being said, Meghdut.
Sure. Let me pick up on that thread about the need for spaces. I really like that point of view, and it's something that I've really tried to incorporate into my work a lot in Kolkata as well. So I moved back to Kolkata in 2017, and since then I've built a couple of very different kind of spaces. So one of them has been the school that I spoke about earlier called Offbeat CCU, which is an interdisciplinary school for adults. It's an experiential interdisciplinary school for adults. And the idea was that, hey, can we look at education in a way where people from very different points of view and very different lifestyles can come and meet each other and learn from them. So we built a backpackers hostel to support the hospitality bit of it. We built a live music venue so people can relax at night. And during the day we'd have yoga classes happening, dance, music, production, theater, coding labs going on. And on the top of that, that's where we built the rooftop as well. And in that process, the whole idea was, hey, education in it by itself has not been disrupted in the last 100 years or so. If you look at the way, and it's a very important point, we spoke about the linear evolution of education and how we've just gone from like digital physical blackboards to digital whiteboards. And I think that's a conversation that not a lot of people have had as much. And I think we are talking about Baiju's becoming what is it called, a decacorn now. I think it's valued at $10 billion, and we are talking about the huge boom of edtech. But has Baiju's as a company, and for all those uninitiated, Baiju's is currently the world's biggest edtech company, but has Baiju's really brought in a different way of doing education? No, it just helps people study for the same exams and still apply their skills and go into an IIT and study there. So you are not essentially creating disruptive value within education. So my thought when we started off BCCU as a school of the future was, hey, why can we not try and predict the way that education transforms itself tomorrow, so that we can understand whether kids are going to at all want to do 4 or 5 year long programs? Would they be more willing to be learning from master classes, which happen at the frequency of once every week while they are continuing their professional engagements? In what way would people learn? And I think one of the greatest issues of today is not COVID. I think, and it's not even something that has come off in the last few months or so. I think one of the biggest issues right now is that every single conversation has become very polarized. I think there is very little scope of every conversation is very head to head. Either you're left or you're right. Either you're right or you're wrong. There's this whole way of looking at each other and saying, hey, you know what, we can have our differences, but we can talk about something. I think that's where education really stems from, right? I mean, the way that the person I am today, a lot of it is because I never hesitated to ask questions. I was always a very curious kid in school. I was constantly bugging my teachers because I did not understand how the world worked. And I think it's not just about design education, any education, not even creative education. In education itself, if you're not able to confront differing ideologies, differing opinions, we will not be able to extend our scope of where we want to go with education. So that was why we started Offbeat CCU. About 30,000 people have come through the doors of Offbeat CCU. Have I made money? No, I've actually lost a bunch of money doing it. But have I learned something? I think so. I think we're onto something here in the way that people are starting to realize, even in a city like Calcutta, that I think if I had created Offbeat CCU in Pune or Bangalore or Delhi right now, I would be sitting on cash, truckloads of cash. I really think in these places, it would have really made it work. But I decided to do it in Calcutta just for the sake of, because I love this city and I wanted to see if there's something we could have done it. The whole concept of Offbeat, I don't think people get it. But each of the individual elements, people are starting to realize that there might be something interesting in there. And while I'm going in there to do a coding masterclass or a boot camp, I meet this random, body movement dancer, and I do a, webinar on that. I do a seminar on that, and I go and go to the rooftop, and then I meet somebody who's come here for a capoeira workshop, and then I decide to join that workshop next day. And it's just the way that education sort of intermingles with itself. I think that's the basic need for education itself. So that's something I would love to hear more about. And I want to give one example. I think we in Kolkata are also very privileged to have these idols. And, before I was dissing the lack of modern day idols, but we are still extremely privileged to have idols we can look up to, like the Satyajit Rays and the Rabindranath Tagores of the world. But if you look at a country like Estonia, and I think it's my favorite example of a country which has truly gone above and beyond what they do. And I think Aya is very close. You're right on the other side of the sea or ocean, whatever that is. Sorry, my geography is really poor, but I know it's right across the water body from you. But Estonia, before, like even 30, 40 years ago, it didn't really have anything to boast of. And it's not a place of like a lot of cultural capital, nor did it have like a lot of natural resources. But what Estonia brings in the last, since say Skype became a huge thing and it came from Estonia, and then TransferWise as a company, and then Bolt, which is this one of the big competitors of Uber, and all of these people, all of these tech entrepreneurs who created these companies, they took an active interest in revolutionizing the country itself by contributing to the entire ecosystem. What do we mean? These are these people called the Estonian mafia. It's these 6 tech entrepreneurs who invest in each other's businesses and all other new businesses that are coming through. If any of you go to Tallinn or Tartu today in Estonia, you will see that it's this hub of, on one side you have the old city where you have a lot of culture that you can obviously look at, which is the equivalent of a Kolkata. But on the other side, you have this massive tech ecosystem, which is backed by so many new incubators with a bunch of coders who are learning, practicing technology, building new age companies. And then you have this massive music scene where you have some amazing DJs playing all the time. There's a very coherent ecosystem, and all of it is supported by very successful entrepreneurs. So I believe if Estonia could have established themselves as the world's first digital economy in the scope of 30 years and completely revolutionized the way their country runs, if you ask me, how can Kolkata be at the forefront of tomorrow's education or enterprise or whatever, I would say, let's give it to the entrepreneurs. Let's get more people like ourselves, maybe, who are desperately passionate about the city, bring them back, give them a reason to kind of disrupt the city itself. And maybe then we'd be on to something. Maybe then in the next 20, 30 years, we'd be talking about our modern day idols from the perspective of today's Kolkata. So with that, I rest my case. I'm sorry, I think I spoke way longer than I should have, but just these thoughts in my mind that I had to blurb out, and hopefully somebody's going to take me on one or all of these points. Thanks, guys.
Great, Meghdut. And I would like to push Shandar, Rajib, and Sonia. I would like to push you back on that notion of place that came with Rahul and Nandita and Meghdut. Because my question to 3 of you, because you have been interacting with corporates and companies, how can private entities like Microsoft, like Adobe, like some of the clients you have at Spread, how can they help co-design the rooftop of Meghdut? Or the place that Nandita is planning in Kolkata, in a heritage building, if I may do a provocation there. We need the help of Microsoft there. We need the help of Adobe. We need the help of whatever. How can we work together? Because on one side, we had Meghdut telling, let's call all the entrepreneurs. But we have so many entrepreneurs. How can we create the conditions for that to happen? Quick bites from each of you, Rajib, Sonia, Shandar.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of very interesting points have been made so far. So I will try to stick to the point that you are trying to drive. I think, Alok, the way I see it is that like Rahul was saying earlier, right? So it feels like at the current stage, education is kind of reactive in a way, like so it kind of sees what's happening and then tries to bring in how do we react react to that and change the curriculum, etc. Whereas there is a lot of evidence that as far as industry or market disruption happens, industry is taking a lead over there. So to Rahul's point, which he was speaking about earlier, I think there is a lot of collaboration that is required, where if industry is actually defining the future of a particular market, how can that knowledge and that information feed into the education system so that the curriculum is not reactive, it's actually proactive, it's future looking in a way, right? And I think that could even allow doing some of the stuff that Meghdut is talking about, as in, be it encouraging, entrepreneurship, or bringing a set of disciplines together in the form of these sort of distributed centers out of which people can work from, be it a rooftop or be it a heritage building and things like that. For example, that Microsoft has something called the Garage, where it's all about, tinkering with stuff, right? And I see potential where education can actually collaborate with that, and just like Fab Labs can collaborate with such organizations to have Garage outside of Microsoft as well, right? Now, obviously, the question will come that what is this relationship give the organization as well? Because for any corporate, they will look at like give and take, right? That's a reality. So that is where I think even Rahul and I had a conversation some time back about this. Is a very interesting models can develop, which can be win-win for both, because even industry is moving towards more of a optional distributed kind of a model, and there is a lot to learn that there's a lot that education can also pick up from that. Yes, there is a lot of opportunity to collaborate, I think, and learn and move forward. I'll just keep it short at that. There's a lot of points in front of me, but I will just keep it short at this point of time.
Okay, great. Now, I'll remember only one thing. Kolkata Garage will exist in few months, thanks to all of you guys. Is that okay? Excellent. Sonia, you want to react on what Rajiv said? We have been in the garage in Hyderabad.
Yes.
We have seen it.
Yes.
How can we have a garage in Kolkata with the help of Meghdut and Nandita and Hemal?
So, first of all, Meghdut has to commit to making many more Meghduts. So, it means that he has to have people who have design, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, all of that in them, because he understands both sides. And that's what we need in the new students coming out, in that space. For me, as far as I'm concerned, my Calcutta played a very important role in my story. Do you know what happened as a retail revolution in India started really from Calcutta, from the pantaloons and Garayat. That was the first store we really transformed, and it was the most cool store in India. And then it became a revolution that went across the country. And whenever I visited Calcutta, I just totally loved it because of the stories. There are stories everywhere you look in Calcutta, and now what we need to do is we need to make these new stories and create a new wave of stories. So be it many more young people who are coming out and developing new projects in places like the Garage. And we need to create this whole new narrative that we invite corporations into, and invite them to play a role in that, invite education into, and say something like Design Open can just be that bridge, or that space where we catalyze these conversations. So we shouldn't stop here. We should have many more such conversations and many more garages and many more Meghduts, and Nandita also then, wanting to come in fast over there because there's so much action going on.
Great. So we see that there is a dynamic happening. Shandar, how can we have you on board?
So I'm going to add a little bit to Meghdut's point and a little bit of the train of thought that Aya sparked off. I think we need to clearly define empathy in design education, along with empathy in design, which is already there, which every student learns about and tries to use as a process.
Do you think they understand what it is? Let me be a little bit provocative. Hello?
Okay, so let's throw this question out to everybody in the audience.
Yeah. So sorry, we lost you. Hello, hello.
No, I said, so let's question open to everybody in the audience. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, got me?
Let's have that floating. Let's go back to the topic.
Yeah. Yes. So and you also mentioned earlier, right? Policy makers, policy designers, policy thinkers, who need to have more of an impact when it comes to the term of design education. Right now, we're looking at design education being more impactful, being more open and accessible to everybody around us. But that's not the case, right? For people coming out of tier 2 and tier 3 cities, it's not an affordable situation, right? Design courses are like skyrocketing high. And what's the best way to impart this modernized, tech-enabled, expensive education to people who are not easily availing this, right? Because a designer can learn from the soft skills that he's picked up on the job, or he can learn from a mentor or a reputed institution which guides them, right? But it's only till that. After that, the practical world takes over, right? So we push a designer into a time of crisis and a project. How does he respond to that? Right? The poor guy is, I mean, losing his mind because he's never sat in a project discussion before with project managers shouting at him and how to design a better screen or design faster, right? So all that conversation starts off with you figuring out whether we need to really put that term empathy back in design education, where we signify the loss that is happening with designers not being able to cope with the real world problems that they are facing, right? Maybe people can pick up this. And
Okay. Who wants to pick up this one? Rahul. I feel there is an audio issue somewhere. Is it okay for the audience in terms of audio? Shandar, we lost some of
Shandar I was losing Shandar just a bit. Is my audio okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Shandar and Meghdud have opened up something very important, that the role of to step back and imagine the role of education, and Alok mentioned anecdotes, so I'll share one. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine regarding the polarization that has been happening, which Meghdud mentioned. It's polarization across all kinds of thought processes, right?
On the planet.
On the planet. And in India, we are seeing a burst of it. Or maybe it is catching us unaware. We are witnessing a burst of it, right? Now, this friend of mine told me that, Rahul, why are you so why is it catching you unaware? Like since independence, we've been only designing. We don't have educated people in India. We just have technically trained people in India. From
That's
day
a tough one.
They just day one, they go and they start learning to get a job, from the lowest education to the highest education. And if that is education, then that is technical training. Where is education happening in India? And that blew my mind, and I've been kind of thinking about it, and for a really long time. And that quickly, because I'm being fast about it. So Shandar, when he brings in this idea of a multicultural campus, and when I spoke first, I talked about privatization and what has happened to campuses. That time I hadn't brought in the economic angle of students and the culture they bring in. And there's a certain loss in the multicultural diversity of educational campuses from 1970s to 1990s and beyond that in India. And anyone who's actually invested in the public, private, or privatized design education in India is fully aware of that. Now, if solution-wise, and that's where I think Shanda, Rajiv can come in. When I see a solution, I don't see a solution in the government and bringing down fees and the government giving large scholarships. The solution is not in the old times. It's not in the semi-socialist economy that facilitated a JNU or facilitated like NID, right? So maybe we need greater and greater. So everywhere we are leading to the same thing. We need a greater and greater partnership, because Adobe gains, Microsoft gains if I have a multicultural campus. They benefit the most from me. I don't mind if UID, I still will get the same fee per 1,000 students, right? So it's not my gain. But if we work out, and that's how the best education institutes globally are. If you think of Ivy League colleges, they always work towards having multicultural campuses as much as possible. Offering, and they have worked out an economic logic for it, which is profitable, sustainable, and I think we should look at it. We should think of it as something important.
Now,
And yeah,
Rahul, my question to all of us is, how do we make it happen? We are designers. How can we prototype something like that and see something happening?
I thought that's what we do, Alok. We prototype, right? We are designers.
Yeah. So
maybe I'll create these pop-up nodes everywhere where this, these nodes, many more garages, many more nodes where things intersect. Technology intersects with humanities, intersects with arts, industry intersects with academia, to be able to create a far more inclusive, with government schools, a far more inclusive model of design. Maybe that's the gift that Kolkata can give, which is a far more inclusive model of design.
Okay. So we have been jumping on many topics, but we see that there are so many interconnections.
Look, I wanted to say something to Meghdut.
Yeah, Rahul.
So Meghdut, like, of course, fantastic energy, and inshallah, it'll happen. However, I think I'm strategically thinking that there are two separate things. One is design or creative education in Calcutta, and one is Calcutta, the economic future, the economic cultural future of Calcutta. They are interlinked, but they don't necessarily have to live and die together. So one of the most important pieces, when we had a conversation about Bauhaus visiting Kolkata in 1922. Now, how did Bauhaus come to Kolkata in 1922? Because Stella Krambish was teaching in Shantiniketan, right? And where is Shantiniketan? What is aspiration about Shantiniketan? But it was attracting the best talents from Japan, Germany, all over India, from Sri Lanka, from Nepal, from China, creating an international hub, momentary bubble of 50, 60 years of it becoming an international cosmopolitan hub. Refusing to look at Ravi Varma's or the Indian classical revivalism, trying to think of an international pedagogy. And people passed out from Shantiniketan and traveled all over the world and got jobs. The jobs didn't have to happen in Shantiniketan. So I want that consideration to also happen. Ideally, both should happen.
And they can be mutually exclusive in certain parts. I think that's important, but they have to be run on parallel train tracks, I believe. See, for the first one, at least the process has started, right? With Ecole Intuit Lab, partnering with us at Techno India and starting their first campus, to Pearl, at least trying to be, inshallah, I really hope it happens, because we really need a lot more players in the ecosystem, I think. And, Calcutta being a city of 20 million people, I think there's enough space for at least 5 different design schools, right? I think there is space for that. There's space for all of these, players to create that healthy sense of competition as well. I remember when my father started Techno India Group 35 years ago, at that time, there was no existence of the concept of engineering education. I'm sorry for digressing from the perspective of design education. I think there was no computer education as such. He started teaching kids in his garage in Hooghly, where he was, and he worked in telco for one day, and he said, I can't do this. I can't work for other people. I'm going to do something of my own. Started teaching kids in his garage. At that time, computer education did not even exist. We're talking about the mid 1985. That's when he started. And then I think Subhash Chakraborty later on, after running a bunch of computer training centers, almost 70 or 80 at some point, he went to Subhash Chakraborty, who was then one of the ministers in the government. And at that time, we're talking about the communist government, right? He said, I will reverse the direction of the train of kids going to South India to study. It was like, how are you going to do that? It's like, we have to do something out of the box, which is we have to create some kind of education which does not exist. So that's how privatized engineering education did not exist before Gautam Roy Choudhury created Techno India Group. And you were talking about the importance of institutions like Shantiniketan. So if you talk about that, if you talk about Vishwabharati University, after that, Techno India University was the first university, first self-funded private university after 100 years of that. That also did not happen. 2013 was when we started our first university. So I'm not saying we've reached that level. I'm saying the process has begun. I'm saying that once these kids, once we're able to create enough consistently empathetic individuals who care enough about their city to finish their education, go wherever they want, but come back and create value for the city. Both these tracks running parallelly will not happen. So it will take a bit of time. It will take more players coming in, and hopefully with more garages, even if it's digitally or physically happening within existing spaces itself, which help individuals redefine themselves. I think we are onto something interesting here. The fact that we have a Design Open Kolkata edition today is the biggest testament to the fact that there is a future that we can talk about, where Hemal will not have to go to California to continue her journey, where she can keep doing that in Calcutta. And Nandita does not give up on her vision of creating Pearl Academy Calcutta, and that heritage building is sitting there looking at your face, Nandita, so you can come back soon, and we can have those conversations across the table. So hopefully we're on to something interesting.
That's great. My big worry now is that time is flying and we yet didn't open the floor to the attendees. We have a bunch of questions which are lining up. So my suggestion is twofold. We are having so great discussions within this group that let's make sure we keep traces of that and that we'll be able to build on that. So Meghdut, we expect after COVID to be all in Kolkata in a place and have the follow-up of this conversation with Hemal, Samchai, and Singara. And we need to make sure now that we answer to the questions as much as possible. So dear panelists, if you could go through the questions and get ready, I will just shoot and read one, and then we can, I see that some questions have been replied online, but let me quickly check. Kalim is based in New York, and he came with this question: what are the current and future conditions for institutional strategic plans, institutional context, especially the current VUCA world, developing accreditation standards, developing peer institutions? I think we have begun to touch upon that. Anyone wants to add something to that? Or Kalim, do you want to fine tune your question and have some extra elements based on what you have heard so far? Rahul, are you ready to jump onto that?
A bit of it, look. So, I mean, one of the conversations you are quite aware that one of the conversations we've been having in the PRE Day context has been around the build direction towards that, and I feel that maybe towards the end might shed some light in that direction. There is obviously, and that was actually officially supposed to be my second proposition, right? That which Meghdut also touched about. He's the one who dropped in the word ecosystem, and it's great to have design schools looking at each other, from curriculum building to benchmarking teaching standards to thinking of opportunities of growth and collaborating with the industry as an ecosystem, and not as individual. So for me, it's a tree and the forest metaphor. Like in a forest, if the tree next to you gets cut, your roots become weaker too. And that's what I kind of observed when the bubble of private engineering in India burst, like about 10 years ago, with one college, two colleges shutting down. It kind of set of a F chain reaction, especially in center South India, leading to in one newspaper report, I just says in my mind about 1,000 colleges shut down in 1 year, and which is a frightening possibility, right? So that kind of the need for a PRE day for me, like apart from everything else, is to prompt and catch IXDA and Cumulus, and to say that both of you are neutral global bodies, and there is a need to curate an ecosystem to facilitate exactly what the direction we've been pushed to in that question.
Okay. Now, Aya, any reaction? One thing I might highlight is that both Cumulus and IXDA are there to trigger conversations, but actions are to be taken by some of you who are there, by some of the others who are in the audience, and so forth. So happy to push and trigger and curate some conversations, but you know, as a designer, I'm a pusher of prototype. And that's why I was asking, okay, when can we see a Kolkata garage with some of you? Because then it will push us in making some stuff. And I know that with Sonia, there is Design Barn in Bangalore. It's a place. And the experiential dimension is important. Now, if we have Hemal and Meghdut and with the support of Shandar and Rajiv and Nandita, we co-design a garage, that would be something fantastic. That would be my provocation to all of you. But Aya, what would be your take on all this?
By listening to all of you, some things came into my mind, like the question of ownership. It was mentioned, I think Meghdut or Nandita invite corporations to be owners, but as well we have to have politicians, because there is always a system, at least in some countries, that, for instance, politicians own design education, design profession in their thoughts, because they are also tools to enable us to serve better the planet. One of my favorite sentences, I'm happy to say it again here, that you can use it whatever way you individually like, individualizing the institutional, but on the other hand, institutionalizing the individual. So we're never siloed alone, I'm sorry. Yeah, even though we sometimes think we are. And then the question, if there is a system, is it honestly carved in the stone? Can we blow this up even one step further? I've been reading articles as well as thinking over the years myself, what is university? Do we need university? What is the alternative model? It was said that Rahul posed a question, where the education is happening. Is India only full of technically educated people? So really interesting soil there in Kolkata, as well as India, of course, globally as well.
Great, thanks. And I don't know if you have time to go through the chat. It's burning there. So many interesting comments. So I would like to thank the spread team, Sudai and Sumed, in having all the logistic in place. And Sudai and Sumed, if you can find a way to keep traces of all the comments in the chat, because we need to do something about that. Rajiv, you wanted to react.
Yeah, I think one point I just wanted to mention is that, again, coming from industry, right? I think the models we speak about, we've previously briefly spoke about a sort of a hub and spoke model where there is no centralized space in terms of spaces that the university need to be. It can be distributed. There can be collaboration with corporates like Microsoft or like Adobe, etc. But I think all those things will only be possible when we start thinking about how that will work in scale from a financial, viability perspective. That is a very, very important point we often miss. For example, I can give an example where very early days in 90s and early late 90s, Apple used to do this thing with design schools, right, across the world. They used to donate computer labs to the design schools, and they used to have this competition called Apple Interface Design Competition. And actually my introduction to human-centered design was through that in 1995. But it did not sustain because of the viability, right? So economic viability is also an aspect we need to consider when we are considering models like this, where there is a collaboration with industry and education. So yeah, just wanted to add that one.
Good. I see in the chat somewhere a question about private education. Sonia, you want to jump on that one?
Okay, so there's a question about how we see the student as a customer. Well, is that wrong? You know, if this is somebody we are preparing for the real world and they need that preparation, what's wrong with that? So my provocation back is that wrong? I mean, you're preparing this person for the real world, you know, and there's a certain expectation that they come with. So if I can have student as customer who needs to be effective when they go out, so they're prepared not just for industry but multiple industries. So it's student-centered education. So you're preparing them as actors. I feel is more important than just preparing them for industry or for entrepreneurship, but just preparing them to have a certain neuroplasticity, you know, adaptability, that they can go on and they can keep acting and they can keep learning and forever adapting to what changes happen.
Nandita, reaction to that?
Sure. Yes, I agree with Sonia. And I think if we look at the student as the center of everything that happens, then you're not thinking of some government regulation or some number of hours that have to be done or a particular structure, but you're actually understanding the need of every student. And the faculty also see that their role is in transforming this person's life. I think that's much more precious than saying, okay, I'm going to teach 32 hours and then do an exam or a viva at the end of that.
Now let me give a provocation. Faculty is okay with that, but management of faculty is looking at KPIs. How do we solve that contradiction? Yeah, Nandita and then Rahul.
Sorry, because I used to be faculty and now I'm management of faculty.
Okay.
Now, management of faculty, what does management of faculty want? They want that their students should be successful, because if their students are successful, more students will come and then everything that management wants will happen. So for management of any kind of education, especially in design education, what is more important than student success?
Well said. Rahul, do you have the same experience?
Someone in this chat box much before, like maybe 1 hour ago, had raised a question that how do you define student success? And that kind of just came to me as Nandita was speaking, right? So I can tell you how I define it for my students. You know, for me, it's like this, right? That you can have an excellent placement cell in your campus and you can get your first job. And for me and for you, our relationship has been marked with a success.
Not at all.
But can you get a second job? You know, can you change disciplines? Can you move laterally, horizontally? You know?
Rahul, Nandita wants to ping back.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
This war we will never be able to close by 8, because life is not, I mean, student success is not about getting a job, and you can't measure it on day 3 of them finishing the course with you. It's about how they manage their early careers, how they manage their relationships, how they manage their relationship with the environment, with industry. There's so much. It's about being when I don't want to use the word successful, but a successful human being, or being a fulfilled human being. And in this case, you have selected creativity or design. So using design to being a fulfilled, useful, intentional human being, that is success.
I'd like to add on to that. Sorry.
And then Meghdut will react. I see that it's bubbling there.
Yeah. So in my stint as leading EDM, which was at one time India's biggest design firm, I trained so many designers on the job. It's not even funny. Okay. And when you're interacting with industry is looking for people who don't take a brief nicely. They're looking for people who can disrupt, who can look into the future, who can trace the what if, what's going to happen next. In design, you need students to be futurists. They need to be looking forward, looking ahead, be able to make connections of what's going to happen next. If in design you can't do that, then you're not successful.
Okay, great. So you see, it's getting quite complex there. Mehdut.
Yeah, I love how this became this whole epistemological discussion about what is the purpose of education itself and how do you quantify success and all that. And I really like the point that Nandita raised there. I completely agree with you on that, actually, that it does not just depend on the job, because you can explain that as the success for the consumer here, which is your student. But if you think about it from a very Indian perspective, because we are mostly Indians here. Aya, by association, is also Indian on this conversation. But because we're discussing about Indian institutions, I think we're forgetting about one of the very important stakeholders, which is the people paying for this. Exactly. And we have to take parents into account. For them, in a lot of cases, if you are putting in an X amount of money for you to send your kids to school, you want them to get a job which is, a return on investment after some point. So I think if we want to have this conversation in a way where it actually has some positive outcome, there needs to be an entire awareness campaign designed by the best designers who are already there on this particular session. And PRE, I think that P can also be replaced with professionals and parents. And let's have a campaign where we are able to create an awareness amongst them that, hey, it's not important that they just find the first job. It's also about that they create ready for their 10th job, or else they start their own thing where they're able to employ other people as well. That's where the whole entrepreneurship bent to the design education and any kind of education field also comes into play. So happy to hear more on
excellent point, because I remember when you began your intervention, I was thinking about parents. We are in a society where parents are expecting.
Exactly. And they're paying for it. So I guess they do deserve to be expecting a little bit as well. Right?
And so it's part, one of the learning we might extract amongst all the many questions and topics is, how do we educate parents about the added value of design and design education? Because half of the parents have got misunderstandings. And Nandita, am I wrong or right?
Okay, thank you. So I think that, Alok, very clearly, when an 18-year-old is coming into design college, for a parent, the first question that they want to know, ki job milega, what is the salary? So placements comes right on top. But meet the student or the parent after 2 years or after 3 years, I do feel that this changes, because the parent sees the student transforming in some ways, sees the confidence that comes into the student, sees the ability that the student has to go out and ask somebody else for an internship. So that focus on placements goes away and becomes maybe a focus on professionalism or being able to deal with life. And of course, a job is important. I mean, of course. I mean, Rajiv, can I have a job? It is very important to get a great job.
Before giving the floor to Mehdut, because he wants to react, I see that Arco is writing, honestly, if a student can say what I learned in the institution is actually helping me in my life, work success, I rarely hear that from anyone. So we have Arco-sen who's very critical about that. How can we help? Yeah.
Can I say, so Orko, your point taken, but maybe as from the point of view of being faculty, it is very different, because we constantly have students coming to us and telling us how much they have benefited from being students and learning some modules or going through some experience. So as faculty, it's hard I have not got the kind of feedback that you've been referring to, but it's not about, I don't think what Nandita is also saying is that it's not that tangible, right? But what Nandita is saying is true, that by the time you are in a design school, by the time you're in your third year, you have transformed as a person. You have become more confident. You have become more multicultural. You have become more inquisitive. And this, I have seen it happening across, we've seen batches develop that way. We've seen batches transform that way, many students in campuses together. So I would I would need to know more of where you're coming from.
Great. So while we'll have Arco reply back in the chat, Meghdut, you want to react? And I want to remind all of us that we have 6 minutes left. And we have a bunch of questions, and that we need another PRE session just to cover all this. Meghdut.
In Kolkata.
Yeah.
In Kolkata. With the Chai Singara.
With Chai Singara, by the way.
Which is very important. Yeah, but I wanted to talk about, I mean, it's something that's been bothering me a lot about the idea of design education. And I remember when Alok introduced me to the topic, he said, talk about your newfound love for design education, because I'm the biggest newbie here out of all of you, least amount of experience, not a designer, etc. But the moment we are talking about design education from the even with the whole purpose of getting a job, etc., don't we think that it's also still, at least at this point, a very privileged educational perspective that we're talking about? Because we have about 80,000 students in our institutions, and most of these students come from very lower middle class backgrounds. And we were talking about the importance of anecdotes as well. I have a lot of campuses in Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, etc., where if I have a fairly affordable design program, and at the same price I have a civil engineering program or an architecture program, the chances are that the kids are probably going to go into one of those programs because they still don't know what lies at the end of this design educational program. And it's actually happened to me, like last year, the son of one of our sweepers at one of our colleges, he's a fantastic painter, and he actually approached us and said, I don't have the money to pay for a program. And he said, we can maybe put you in one of our programs. We didn't have a space in architecture. We gave him a space in civil engineering. And then this year, when Ecole came into the picture, he came to me one day and I told him, hey, you know what, we can shift you to our design program. And his parents, not only did they not understand, the kid himself still did not want to do it. Like, he was like, I'm okay, I want to get it, keep myself into the fine arts piece. And I said, I can put you in Bachelor of Fine Arts. He said, but I don't know if I'll ever get a job through that. What if I'm comfortable, drawing bridges and in my civil engineering class, and I know I can at least become an engineer at the end of it. So I think the need for awareness not just lies again with the students, but with the parents, with all the students themselves. And what are we going to do about the inaccessibility of design as a mindset itself? I think that's something I would really want to end my provocations with. I would love to hear something from this, because if there's any tangible outcome coming out of this particular question, I'm sure it can be found within this group. So
now Meghdut, the question you have raised is, I would say, a planetary question. We see that in so many parts of the planet, similar question. And that is where we as a design community, we really need to reboot ourselves and think about the next. But we have 3 minutes left, and I'll give the floor to Nandita, Sonia, and then Aya to quickly close that. And we will be frustrated because there are so many topics that we won't be able to explore. Nandita, just 2-3 words to try to close this unending set of topics.
I think what I'm going to say now is different to what I've been saying for some time, because Meghdut, you talked about a specific example. Yes, we must make design more accessible, but if somebody is trying to grow out of a particular environment and needs the surety of having a fixed job and a very straight and direct path, I completely accept that. And everybody doesn't have to be living a life of dreams. So for your particular example of this boy who is the son of a sweeper at one of the colleges, I think it's a very good idea to, as a first generation college going person, to be safe and do something which is very, very directional, unless he has a strong set of mentors to help him navigate himself with. But I do agree that design should be more accessible.
Great. So let's do a quick run each speaker, and then we'll close this session. And I must say I'm frustrated because I want 1 hour more. That is my frustration, but I'll leave with my frustration. And I'll ask Sonia, then Rajiv, then we'll have each of you having a few seconds. Sonia.
Yeah. at one time, at least in our country, and I would assume also in Calcutta, entrepreneurship was not cool. Okay, and then it became cool. Maybe there are parallels to draw from there about how it became cool. It needs role models, it needs an ecosystem. So it needs people like your story, telling stories of all these entrepreneurs, for it to suddenly, because I've seen the transition actually in Coimbatore, where at one time I was invited along with a bunch of people to talk to the students about entrepreneurship. These were engineers who were getting to now, you've seen Forge, it's a throbbing ecosystem there, creating entrepreneurs. So we need that entire system to be created to be able to make this entire shift happen.
Great. Rajiv.
Yeah, so I think I had given this a little bit of a thought, and I think there's so many points, so many great points, but I think I want to summarize it, if I have to, from these 3 points in terms of not just design education, education in general itself, right? So I think there are 3 dimensions to it. One is the aspiration, awareness, and access, right? So I think as far as design is concerned, we see a lot of aspiration coming out of not just Kolkata, but the new generation. There's a lot of aspiration. There is a lack of awareness that I see amongst sort of parents. We spoke about this. And what is the potential for design education as a career, and so on and so forth. And then I think somebody also mentioned in the chat is that how can you make it more accessible, right, more affordable, and at scale. I think to me that is one of the biggest questions. The other things are still manageable in terms of awareness and those other aspects, but I think the big problem that we would have at our hands, especially when we are looking at digitization, when we are looking at remote education and things like that, is basically access and affordability. So in my mind, that's going to be the biggest challenge as designers. We have to figure it out.
Great. Thanks, Shandar, and then Rahul, then Aya, and then Hemal to close this.
Thanks, Alok. I totally resonate with what Rajiv was mentioning about accessibility and awareness, right? It's all about the end. So we mentioned the end user or the student as a designer coming into the design foray, right? And how does he get more aware? If things are more accessible to him, look at the tier 1 city difference and the tier 2 and tier 3, right? There's a big difference in terms of the economic gap or even the educational gap or the awareness gap, right? And I believe companies like Microsoft, Adobe, companies like Oracle, companies which are big in terms of the design space and also the entrepreneurship scale space, they're doing a lot in the education space as well, in terms of awareness, in terms of opening up for student sponsorships, student scholarships and stuff like that. That level of awareness has to trickle down to the other design schools and design institutes, and even on the design community level, right? So that's my take on it.
Okay, great. My take is that I'm expecting more from all of you guys, so I'll be pushing you. Be ready. Rahul.
First, quick response to Rajiv is, I think immediate need is to set up a think tank with a timeline to resolve this idea of accessibility and inclusivity in education. There are economic and models and solutions available, but we just have to make it work and in a sustainable way. But that is not the only idea of sustainable. It is not only of money, because one of the things I got very fascinated with Microsoft uh, is that when I learned about the low-tech interaction design-based work you are doing with healthcare in the rural sectors, that absolutely fascinated me. And today, when we are on Zoom or we are on Blackboard migrating into LMS, and we have students from tier 2, tier 3 cities, we have network issues even in Delhi. That conversation with you keeps coming back, Rajiv. That technology doesn't always have to be that heavy data, 4G, 5G. a good conceptual technology-led solution can even happen, be feature phone-led. But one has to put your minds to it, and one has to have a research team working on it, executing it, as Alok says, prototyping it. I think only that for now, that much itself, Alok.
Great. Thank you. Hemal, Meghdoot, you already said, but you want to add a last word, and then Hemal, and then Aya?
The only thing I'm going to say is that a little bit of frustration is always good. It means that, you know, we had enough stuff that we want to come back for more. So that's all from my side. Cheers.
Okay, so
Lovely
you're getting ready to host us. Thanks. Hemal, some of the closing words as you have launched all this session.
Yep. So just one point. I mean, I'm reminded of my own education, my post-graduation, which was in New Zealand back in 2003. And the entire setup was that our teachers were our art director and creative head, and we were basically the ones working on creative briefs, which were real life projects. So we worked with actual clients in New Zealand, and they would come to us, and we would also learn how to write those briefs. And I found that really interesting because I was immediately ready to, enter, the industry. I had a portfolio of work with actual work done. And I think for me, that's something I want to speak. I want to tell the different educators today that it is imperative to have this industry mix, how the students study, to prepare them in terms of how they should approach work, and more importantly, how they should also present the work. I've been a jury in NID, I've been a jury in NIFT, so I've kind of gone through that as well. So that was one. And the other, of course, was to remind designers that at the end of the day, they are problem solvers. And so they must understand that, and they must remember that it's not just form, but it's also the function. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to add.
Great. Thanks, Hemal. Aya, closing word, and then we'll have to say bye to everyone. And sorry to all the attendees where questions have not been taken, but we'll try to document that. The video is there, and we'll see how to feed. Yes, Aya.
Yeah, I'm getting back to the question: does design education, do we know what and how to educate? And we have to know that to understand, open all doors, break the barriers, silos, raise the voice for design together with all stakeholders. We have to know what education is about, trim the environment, be flexible to adapt. I would sum up, be like a cat thrown out from the window, landing safely and run further. So that's
Great.
all.
Nice.
Thanks for that metaphor. So let's imagine the cat running and coming down in a tsunami. That's our life. So, but we are strong enough to resist and feel on our feet. So thank you all the speakers. Thank you attendees. And enjoy the rest of the evening in India. Enjoy the rest of the day in other parts of the planet. And thanks everyone for all your contributions. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Alok and Hemal, for hosting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll meet.
And thanks all the participants for hanging in there. Thank you.
We had a great audience. Thank you very much all.